Hello again. This is Krista Townsend, and the next step in my process is going to be the focus of this video. You've got my palette here in front of you, and the image that I'm going to be working on is over here in the right-hand corner. And I am putting some basic primary colors down on the palette, keeping it simple. But I will show you that you can mix a lot of colors from just 4 colors and white. So up in the left, we've got Cad Yellow Light, and then Cad Yellow Dark, Cad Red Light, which is the color that I used in the last video as the grisaille underpainting color. So I like to keep the warm red that I choose in the palette so that there's some harmony once I start adding color on top of that red grisaille, which I will show you all about in the next video. But for now, the final color is ultramarine blue. And I like to be as organized with my palette as I can, and this is a relatively new thing for me. I've taken some classes recently with some wonderful painters, from abstract to more realistic still life painters, and each of them have really enforced in me the need to think about the color in a more organized way than I have in the past, and it really is paying off. So I take 2 palette knives and I start working first on my cooler greens on the left-hand column. So I'm starting at the top with the lightest and moving down to the darkest. And so the first one has got a lot of Cad Yellow Light and a little bit of ultramarine blue. And then I shift all the way down to the bottom, which will have more ultramarine blue and less Cad Yellow Light. I don't add any white at this point yet. I'm just adding the main colors and sticking with just 2 for right now. And I also make sure that once I'm finished with this one column of the cooler greens, that I take the time to wipe off my palette knives so that I'm making sure that my palette is nice and clean and not muddy. Once you start working with the paint on the canvas, it can get a little bit muddy if you're not careful, and so starting out with a nice, clean, organized palette is really helpful. So here again, I'm putting a larger daub of Cad Yellow Dark at the top and a little bit less of the ultramarine blue, and then working my way down to the bottom, which is flip-flop, so there's more ultramarine blue and less of the yellow. So that second column there is warm greens, and depending on the painting, I will obviously select the colors that I'm mixing differently. But there's a lot of different greens, from warm to cool greens in this, so I decided to mix up a bunch of green to get me started. The yellows and really warm colors are a little simpler, so I've right now got a little mix of Cad Red Light and Cad Yellow Dark up at the top 2 of those orangey colors, and then down at the bottom I'm mixing the Cad Yellow Light and the Cad Red Light together. And then the final column is going to be just a little bit of the ultramarine blue and some Cad Red Light to make a brown, which you can see some of. So the areas around the middle of the sunflower are going to have a lot of that brown in it, but also some of the darker greens that are almost black when you look at the one at the bottom, especially the Cad Yellow Dark and ultramarine blue mixed together make a pretty rich, dark, almost black green. And then here I'm giving myself one more really dark that's a little bit heavier on the blue, side of the blue mixed with the red. And then finally, I will start to incorporate some whites here. Now, as I go back and paint using all of these, I will use white to lighten and darken, to lighten some of the colors in comparison to each other on the canvas. But as far as my palette goes, I do keep it pretty limited as far as the white at this point. So these blues will be for the sky. So I'm just looking at kind of the extremes there, the darkest and the lightest that I'll probably use, although I might add some more white to the lighter one in some areas as I paint. And then I'm going to use some of that white as well to mix with a few of the greens to just kind of cut the brightness of the greens, and I'll do that over next to them so that I can keep my palette organized again. And being able to recreate any of these colors as I'm painting is important. You always want to try and mix up a lot of color in the beginning so that you aren't running out as you're painting, but I am going to be working on a 30 by 30 inch canvas, and this is not going to be enough paint as I go. I'm going to need to be mixing more of some of these colors. And so if I have everything organized, then I know pretty much how to recreate any of these colors. So I've got my cool greens, my warm greens, my oranges and yellows, and then my brownish purple colors, as well as my blues, and I can recreate them at any time as I need more for my painting. So that's it. That is how I start the next step 2, I guess, of my process of painting. And I'll be back again soon with the actual canvas. Thanks for listening and watching.